on then. Anyway, so good to see everybody here. See a couple new faces, see some old faces, see some very old faces. But yes, it's a good time, and we're just happy that we're all gathered here together. So, let's go ahead and get into the word for today. So we're getting almost to the end of the book of James, and we'll be going on to the book of Malachi after that. But let me just go ahead and get started. So, do you consider yourself patient? Who thinks they're patient? You guys have no confidence. Very few of you guys think you're patient. We're living in an age where patience is kind of it's an unnecessary inconvenience, right? We're living in the age where you can get food instantly, you can get information instantly, and so waiting is something that's almost an unthinkable thing these days, right? But you'll see in this word, in this passage today, and really in the Bible as a whole, that patience is something valued, right? You've all heard the phrase, patience is a virtue, right? And for many of us, patience is something we struggle with. Some of us are actually pretty patient. Some of us. Some of us may be too patient. This is actually a problem I had when I was younger, particularly when it came to when I liked somebody. So like the first person I liked, I waited about, 5 or 6 years before I said anything. And so I learned the hard way that you gotta strike when the iron is hot, because when it goes cold, it stays cold forever. Regardless, let's get into the word for today. James 5, verses 7 to 12. James 5, verses 7 to 12. Open your Bibles, look at the screen. Where the Lord says this: "Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door." Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. Again, our theme for this year, 2019, is one of holiness, understanding that God is holy and knowing that we as the children of God are called to be like Him. So our desire this year is to get a better idea of what it means to live a holy life. We've been going through the book of James. We're nearing the end. We've seen a lot of themes that are kind of crisscrossing. You'll see that again today. But there's been constant themes of suffering and persevering through that, of listening to the Word and living in godly wisdom. And then the call to love your neighbor as yourself, that is the law. The law is love. And then we spent this long time talking about the tongue and the power of the tongue and how we had to be careful to use godly wisdom and to use the tongue in a way that encourages and edifies each other. And then the last couple of weeks we've been looking at the issue of money. That money itself can cause a lot of issues where all of a sudden we feel like we're independent from God, and oftentimes that our desire to earn and gain more money can actually cause oppression and suffering for those that are also in the body. And so we're going into this final part, and these are the final kind of exhortation or commands. James is giving some final words of advice that he wants to leave his audience with. These are his final words. And if you remember the context from last week, he was really speaking to people that were going through oppression, people that were being just treated harshly by those with money that were extorting them and taking advantage of them. And so James speaks very negatively of those type of people. And so now the question is, brothers and sisters, for those of us that have felt this type of oppression, have felt this kind of suffering, how do we respond? And so to remind ourselves what James has already said in chapter 1 and verse 20, he says, human anger does not produce the righteousness that God God desires. Right? Our response should never be one of anger, of retribution. That is actually not the Christian way. And interestingly enough, if you really look at this latter part of chapter 5, he's emphasizing again what we're supposed to not do and do with our tongue. Right? So here in verses 9 and 12, he's saying things, don't use your tongue in this way. Right? Don't grumble against each other, and do not swear. And I'll talk about these things later. Okay? So, but actually the way it closes is James closes with, how then should you use your tongue? And they give you a sneak peek for next week, prayer. The way we are supposed to use our tongue, the way we are supposed to respond to all the difficult things that are happening to us, is to pray. Now with that, he starts off by saying, be patient then, brothers and sisters. Now if you guys remember the last 2 weeks, he didn't use brothers and sisters, but he said, now then, or come now. But now he's returning and speaking back to the believers, and he's saying, brothers and sisters, be patient. Now, a lot of times people come to me asking for different words of advice, a lot of questions, and sometimes people are going through different struggles, and I'm sure the last thing they want to hear is me to tell them, be patient. Brothers and sisters, that's what the Lord says. So if any of you comes up to me with that type of question or comment, don't be surprised if I say, be patient. Now, in many ways, this goes back to chapter 1, where James already said, consider pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Right? In chapter 1, James tells us, persevere. It's a joy, right? Again, he's saying suffering is something to be joyful about. And again, this is something that just kind of blows our minds. Why would we be joyful of suffering? Suffering comes and you're like, yes. No one is like that. But James is saying it produces perseverance. And so in that same way, he's saying be patient, persevere, endure, press on. And then it says until when? Until the Lord's coming. Now, if the audience that James had written to knew that 2,000 years later Jesus still hadn't come, I think they might have taken this word a little bit differently. I don't know, James. I don't know if I can wait 2,000 years. And brothers and sisters, I honestly can't tell you when Jesus is coming. Right? Anytime someone tells you Jesus is coming on this date, don't believe them. I remember when I was I think maybe in like middle school or high school, there was a big movement. Jesus was coming. I think was it 1993 or something like that. I even found this T-shirt that my dad had. I don't know where he got it from. And I was like, oh, wait, well. And it says, he had this T-shirt about Jesus coming in 1993. I heard stories about people who would believe these things, and they would max out their credit cards and do stupid things so that I don't have to pay my credit card back because Jesus is coming. And there was even, just a couple of years ago, it was named Harold Camping, this very famous Christian radio guy, who had gone back through the book of Revelation and calculated the exact date. And again, he was wrong. So brothers and sisters, we don't know when Jesus is coming, but we do know he is. Right? For those of you that have been going to the main service, you've been hearing our head pastor talk a lot about Chedim, right? The second coming. I have a friend whose name is Chedim, so it kind of confuses me. Basically, I'm like, hey, what's up, second coming? I think the word in Greek, I think, is perusia, but regardless, and they're actually, they're like females that are called Chedim too. It's not just a male name. Like, so Christians in Korea crack me up. They give their children some funny names. But you know, again, it's good because you want to be reminded Jesus is coming back. Chedim Miruara. Jesus is coming back. But brothers and sisters, this is a word of encouragement. Even though it's been 2,000 years, there are certain things that, for those of us that believe in God, we know for sure. First off, Jesus came onto this earth as the Son of God, and he died for our sins. Secondly, not only did he die, he was resurrected from the grave. Brothers and sisters, if we have no resurrection, we have no faith. Resurrection is ultimately the proof of the faith that we have. It is the substance which our faith lies upon. But if it just ended there, well, so first off, if Jesus didn't come back from the grave, then Jesus is just a sad story. This this Son of God came and he suffered and he died. Poor, that's like, in many ways it's like a Korean movie. It just ends and everyone's sad. But he comes back from the grave, right? Proving that he is God, proving that he has victory over death, and proving that he also has victory over sin. But not only that, he promised that he will come back. So brothers and sisters, for those of us that believe, this is something that we need to put our assurance in. Jesus is not just this mythical figure, or Jesus is not just this historical figure that did cool things. He is the Son of God. He died for our sins. He was resurrected, and he promised that he would return. And when he returns, he promised that he would take us with him. This is something to be excited about, to be joyful of. And because of this, when you go through suffering, when bad things happen to you, take heart, because no matter what, Jesus is coming back. This is something that the early church took to heart. Now, in many ways, they thought Jesus was coming back in their lifetime. And so they took it slightly differently. Brothers and sisters, that is a great way to live. Because if you are living with the expectation that Jesus can come back tomorrow, then that will encourage you to live in a way that would make Jesus proud. So brothers and sisters, we sang that song, Soon and Very Soon. That is the attitude we're meant to have toward God. That Jesus is coming soon, to have that expectation, right? In Korean, it's like, 기다리는 거 말고 기대하는 거. Right? To not only wait, but to wait with expectation. That's one of the words that I like that in Korean, that they're similar. In English, it doesn't really work that way. But regardless, what we're encouraged here is that the Lord is coming. So even if you're suffering right now, it's okay. Jesus is still coming back. Now, he uses this example of farming. He says the farmer waits for the autumn and the spring rains. Now, honestly, brothers and sisters, I don't think anybody here is a farmer. And my dad is. Okay, he didn't pass any of that on to me, so I know nothing about farming. We have a couple plants that we're trying to take care of. Some are doing okay, some are not. So we're still learning about how to do that. But regardless, one of the things that farmers understand is that there's only so much control they have. But particularly in Palestine, there were two important rains. It had to rain in the late autumn, early winter to help set the ground for when you put the seeds in, that there would be a good foundation for them. And then in the spring, the late spring, that was the rain that would help make sure that whatever you planted blossomed in the summer. If neither of those rains happened, then you didn't have a good crop. You wouldn't have much food. So James uses this example to remind us, you know what? You don't have control. But you can wait with expectation, because you know if these things happen, then you are going to be blessed with a great, bountiful harvest. So in that same way, he's saying, be patient, right? You're going through suffering, people are mistreating you, but brothers and sisters, be patient, because God will take care of this. Have that expectation, leave it up to him. And then he continues and he goes straight into, be patient, don't grumble against one another. Right? Now, this is kind of an example that's used more in the States, because I'm sure it applies here in Korea too. But one of the examples of people that are not patient are when families go on road trips. Right? You're making this long drive and you have the kids in the back. What do the kids do when you're driving for a long time? Parents, tell me. What do kids do when you're driving in the car for a long time? Okay, now these days they have video games. They have things that distract them. Before that, I'm talking about my era where we had nothing. We just had to look out the window. Are we there yet? Right? We would keep asking that question. Are we there yet? I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. Can we stop? And so that was always the example to show people that are not patient. And brothers and sisters, this is what happens when we are not patient and we have this discontent in our heart. What do? We start to grumble among each other. We start to voice this discontent. And brothers and sisters, it starts to spread, right? All of a sudden, this community starts to become a toxic one because we start speaking out the frustrations that we have. And so here's an interesting thing. We know Leviticus 19:18 because we know the second half. Love your neighbor as yourself. I'm the Lord. But the first part of this verse that we often don't quote is, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against any among your people. So in this law of love, there's also the thought, you know what? Don't cause discontent with each other. Don't seek it out. Instead, love your neighbor. There's two parts to loving your neighbor. One of them is to not cause discontent among each other. So in this way, the problem is, the moment we start voicing our frustrations, all of a sudden, people join in. Right? And all of a sudden, as the expression says, misery loves company. All of a sudden, everyone's joining in it together. Right? Now, for those of you that work in the companies, in the office environment, this is like, what kind of brings people together usually? It's when you get to like the break room or you go to the water cooler and you start complaining about your boss, right? Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. You're like, and then all of a sudden you're like best of friends, right? But then it actually doesn't create a good work environment. All of a sudden you're looking for more reasons to come and be like, oh my gosh, did you see what just happened? And all of a sudden you're just piling it on. Brothers and sisters, what we are being encouraged is to not join in on this, is to not add fuel to the fire. Because when there's frustration, where there's discontent, we're actually called to be patient. Right? We're called to wait upon the Lord. And so James reminds us by saying, you will be judged. And the judge is coming. So he's referring again to Jesus. The judge is standing at the door. So not only is Jesus coming back, but he's coming back as the final judge. And remember, that standard, the judgment that he is judging us against, is the law of love. When we choose not to love others, we're putting ourselves at odds against the one who we're looking forward to coming back. So remember, Jesus is coming back. Be happy about that, but at the same time, be on guard. Live in a way that honors the King. And so he continues and he says, look at these other examples of faith that we have before us. We have the prophets, right? We have Job. Now, if you guys know the prophets, if you guys read the Old Testament, you look at the prophetic books, the major and the minor prophets, these are some depressing books. If you want to be depressed, read the book of Jeremiah. Right? Like you open these books, you're like, oh my gosh. And you look at the lives these people lived, and they were horribly persecuted by their own people. Why? Because they were the bearers of bad news. Right? Nobody wants to hear negative things. And so these people are like, what? Don't tell me this. Die. And, they would do these things. And what made it even worse, they were false prophets that would say the exact opposite. When Jeremiah, again, the very depressing book of Jeremiah, when Jeremiah was saying, hey, you're going to be enslaved for 70 years, there were other prophets at the very same time saying, it's only going to be 2 years, don't listen to that guy. So brothers and sisters, for those of us that have seen this example, proclaiming truth often comes with negative consequences. But the people that have stood before us, these prophets, chose that harder path. And they persevered. Now Job is interesting because a lot of us, when we read the book of Job, all we see is a bunch of complaining. Right? We're like, Job, how is he persevering? This fool just complains for chapters and chapters. But in actuality, in the time that James wrote this book, Job was actually, there are other writings about him that he was seen as an example of someone who persevered up until he started to complain. But Job lost everything, right? Job lost everything that was held dear to him, and to this example, he persevered. Now, James, again, he refers back to what he wrote in chapter 1, verse 12, where he talks about people who persevere under trial are blessed, right? Now, I told you that word for blessed isn't just our understanding of this very simple word for blessed that we normally think of, but it's someone that is drawn closer to God in their relationship with God. But James reminds us the reason why they are blessed, the reason why they can stand this trial is because the Lord is full of compassion and mercy. And he reminds us also, look at Job, look at how that story turned out. Job persevered, and not only did God bless him, God blessed him even more than he had before. Right? And so James is reminding us, remember who your God is. You know, a lot of times when we go through suffering, the first thing we do is like, why God, what is wrong with you? Why do you hate me? Right? And all of a sudden, we're like, we forget about all the good things that God has given to us, and we assume that He wants to do evil things to us, right? Like a lot of people have this image of God as this child with a magnifying lens, and we're a bunch of ants on the ground, and He's using that magnifying lens to shoot us with sun rays. He's like melting us. That is not God. Right? But a lot of us have this misconception that God wants to make us suffer, just to make us suffer. But brothers and sisters, what I want you to understand is that, you know what, God does allow suffering to happen, but it's actually for our good. As difficult as these seasons might be, it's actually to our benefit. Even if we can't see it in the moment, God does these things, He allows these things because it's actually for our benefit. Right? So brothers and sisters, what we have to remember when we go through suffering is be patient, but be patient because you know who God is. You know that God desires things for your goodness. God desires to shower you with mercy and compassion. And even though you're going through this suffering for this very moment, He will still bless you in the end. So be encouraged. Remember who God is. If you know who God is, if you know His character, then this little suffering is something that will surely pass, brothers and sisters. And then it jumps to verse 12, where all of a sudden it's like, do not swear. Now swear can be confusing because first off, a lot of people think about first the word swear, like swear words, right? Curse words. Yo, kuganio. So this is not swear words. This is like when you are taking an oath, right? Now some of us, I might be dating ourselves, you might know that song, and I swear, you know, by the moon and the stars in the sky. I'll be there. I'll be there. Anyway, so that you know, we know these types of songs, we know these types of oaths that are being made. But you know, think about those lyrics. By the sun and the moon and the stars, or no, by the moon and the stars in the sky, I'll be there. That's not true. You're not always there. You're not God, right? You are making an oath that you actually can't keep. So in many ways, making this claim, like, you know, I vow on the grave of my grandmother, blah, blah, like making these broad claims are usually the way we back up something that we can't actually do. Now, Jesus Himself says in Matthew 5, verses 33 and onward, again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill it to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is His footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So Jesus Himself said something very similar. Just say yes and no. Do not take an oath. Do not make this vow that you cannot keep. And if you guys remember the book of Judges that we did last year, there's a story of Jephthah. And Jephthah is this judge, and you know, he's kind of this cunning man, and there's all sorts of things that are going on, and he's just about to attack the enemy, and for some unknown reason, he takes an oath. He says, okay, God, if you give me victory, whoever comes to greet me when I come back, I will offer to you as a sacrifice. Right? And then the story happens, he wins, and he's so happy, and he goes home, and the person to greet him when he comes is his one and only daughter. And the story continues. She's like, I gotta kill you. And she's like, well, I'm still young. Let me live my life a little bit, and then you can kill me. And so that's basically what happens. She goes and she hangs out with her buddies, and then he kills her. That's the end of the story. It's a horrible, horrible story. But one that was absolutely unnecessary. First off, God does not desire sacrifice of people, especially not children. It's very clear in the Bible. But basically what Jephthah was doing, he was trying to bargain with God. He's like, look, God, I'm not sure if this is going to work. So you know what? I will make this oath. So why don't you make sure this happens for me? Jephthah was bargaining with God, even though God himself had declared to him that this was what he was going to do for him. Jephthah wasn't satisfied with that. He decided to take an unnecessary oath. And so, brothers and sisters, oftentimes, when we make these claims, we are basically bargaining with God because we do not have faith in him. Because we don't trust him. So we're like, okay, God, I'll do this for you. So why don't you make this happen if I do this? Right? That's basically what an oath is. We are basically trying to manipulate God to do things for us by making these promises that either we can't keep or are unnecessary. So brothers and sisters, what has been clear throughout this entire book of James is the call is for us to have genuine faith, to trust in God, and to not try to twist God into doing what we desire, and to not work around God, but instead, what we are called to be is truthful. Make your yes, yes, your no, no. Anything beyond that is unnecessary. Now, brothers and sisters, we live in an age where truthfulness is actually it's almost like an option. You can be truthful, but you can kind of live in the gray, and it's okay, right? It kind of saddens me actually. A lot of times I'll see, even in ministry, kind of going through back doors, right? We kind of take shortcuts. And we're like, well, we could do it the hard way, but why don't we take the shortcut instead? Right? And I see this happen in ministry all the time, and every time people do these things, it usually bites them. It turns around and it bites them in the butt in the end. So brothers and sisters, what I want to encourage us is, regardless of whatever you're doing, whether you're a student, whether you are in work, to be truthful, right? To live moral lives, to not cut corners, to not do things that are only for your benefit, but that are actually immoral, right? It's always right to choose righteousness. It's not easy, but it's always right. But we're living in an age where we're encouraged, you know what? Let's kind of go around that. But I'm encouraging you, brothers and sisters, no. Be truthful. Your yes be yes, your no be no. And so, brothers and sisters, if you're going through this through a season of trial, or if I want to encourage you guys to just be patient in this moment. To not be frustrated with God, and to speak out against him, to not desire to manipulate God into doing the things that you desire, but to instead be patient and to persevere. But you can do this if you know who God is. You can do this if you know that God himself is trustworthy, and you know that he will work for your good. And as you know who he is, you can seek to follow his law, which is to love him and to love others. To not use your tongue in a way that brings disunity and discouragement. To not use your tongue in a way to make these broad, big claims that are actually trying to manipulate God, but instead to love God and to love each other. This is the challenge that we have, that in the face of suffering, that we would seek patience, that we would know who God is, and that we would seek to love him and others. Let's take some time to pray. Go ahead and close it today. Brothers and sisters, I want us to take a moment to just to fix our eyes on who God is, and that we would just ask God to reveal His character to us right now. That He is a God of love, that He is a God of mercy. And even if we don't deserve His kindness, even if we don't deserve His mercy, He is a God that freely gives it to us. So I just want us to take a moment to just pray and to look upon Him and say, God, reveal who you are to me. Help me to understand what kind of God you are. Let's pray. And as we look upon God, I want us to take a moment to just pray that He would encourage us to be patient in these seasons of trials, to be willing to wait upon Him because we know who He is. So let's pray that He would help us to be patient and to truly trust in Him. Let's pray. Father, you are good, worthy of all praise, holy and righteous. And because of who you are, you weren't satisfied leaving us, Lord, in a place where we were separated from you and we were dead in our sin. But instead, you sent your only Son, Jesus Christ, to die for us, to take away from us what we truly deserve, Lord. And then in that same way, you raised Him from the dead, showing that He is your Son. And Jesus is coming back. He made that promise, and we know, Lord, that in His return, that we will experience, Lord, your fullness and your mercy forever. So as we look upon who you are, Lord, and as we go through difficult seasons, as we go through suffering, as we go through trials, may we remember who you are, Lord. And may you give us the ability, Lord, to be patient in this suffering, Lord. To trust in you. To not try to manipulate you. To not speak out in just discontent to others, Lord. But to simply trust, Lord. And to know, Lord, that you will deliver us and you will rescue us, because that is the God that you are. We thank you, Lord, and we praise you in Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.